Welcome to Your Lettings Journey, a brand new podcast that's essential listening for landlords with property in North London. Now, everyone will have their own unique landlord journey, from the way they get into property to the way they hang up or pass on their keys, and then all the different decisions in between. But along the way, we're all faced by many of the same issues and potential pitfalls. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Ramesh, and together we have a lifetime of experience as landlords, letting agents and tenants that we want to share with you to help you navigate your lettings journey.
So if you're an experienced landlord wanting to make sure that you're keeping on the right side of all the rules and regulations, or if you're completely new to this game and don't know where to start, then this is the podcast for you.
Your Lettings Journey is produced by Belvoir, Enfield and Central Housing Group. For more information, visit belvoir.co.uk/Enfield and centralhousinggroup.com.
Your Lettings Journey is all about lettings and being a landlord. So this week, I'm super pleased to be joined by Denny Adam. And Denny is a seasoned property professional and a local landlord. And listen in as he explains his journey, how he got into property, how he's planning to get out of it, and all the things he's learned along the way. Enjoy. Okay, so welcome, Denny. Thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
So as I was saying, today is all about your experiences as a landlord. So I know that you've been in property for a very long time. So would you like to, in a nutshell, or briefly describe your credentials? How long have you been in property and doing what?
Far too long than I'm prepared to admit. But I've worked in it, starting with housing co-ops, then housing associations, then worked for a private developer, then was a director of a house building company, building houses across, mainly across Enfield and Barnet, and into Hertfordshire and also down on the south coast, and then set up a separate consultancy company. And I was running my own consultancy company up until, I suppose technically it's still there, but I'm doing very little now because I'm pretending to be retired.
Okay, but you're still a landlord, which is good.
I am indeed, yes.
So at what point in your property travels did you decide you were going to be a landlord, and when did you first invest?
It was probably about 15 years ago, I guess. I just had an extra little bit of cash and thought, what should we do with it? And thought I'd been in property for most of my working life, so perhaps I really ought to invest and buy an apartment or two. So we began slowly with one, as one does, and figured it out, and built up a very, very small portfolio from that.
Okay, so did you think you would stop at one or two, or did you always know you were going to have, because you say small, but for most people, where you consider most landlords have one or two properties, you are more than that.
Oh, yes. The original intention was to have three. That's because I'm the proud owner of three daughters. And the theory is that when they all came back from university, they could have somewhere to live that wouldn't be in our house, making all the noise that people who come back from university do. So the idea is that they could move into there, and essentially it would give them all somewhere to live. Unfortunately, they all had slightly different aspirations when they come back. So the first one to come back from university said that she didn't want to live anywhere in Enfield. She'd much rather live in Chelsea. And can she have a nice big 4 or 5 bedroom house so she can live with all her mates? No, was the answer to that. And so it's been downhill ever since. So we have And then it became a let's keep these properties as a retirement pension plan. So okay. They're effectively because having been sort of self-employed for the last 15, 20 years of my life, pension payments into a pension plan were intermittent, shall we say.
Okay.
So therefore, I saw this as a way of creating an income for my dotage.
So it's kind of fortunate that your daughters didn't want to move into these properties then.
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely.
I'm delighted. However, one of them has since bought one of them, so from me.
This is true. And you didn't replace that one?
No.
Are you not going to be buying anymore? Is this it?
No, not going to be buying anymore because there isn't quite... Actually, there probably is enough equity to buy something which is a bit small, but I'm... when you get to my age, dear, you don't really want to be entering into huge mortgages.
Okay.
And actually, it becomes complicated when you're a person of retirement.
Okay, so your exit strategy then originally was for your daughters to take on, what you were presumably going to give the properties to your daughters, or they would buy them at a lower amount.
Give them.
Oh,
so go that far.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
so
Bank of Mum and Dad would help there.
So the idea was that they would buy them at discount or outstanding, or whatever the outstanding debt was. That was the theory.
Okay. And so now that they have all moved on and done different things and indeed left your home, and you've increased on the size of your portfolio, will you be holding on to these to give you a regular income through your retirement, or are you looking at selling them before?
No reason to sell. Quite happy to keep them on to provide an income. And yeah, that's the idea. That this will be our pension plan, to provide income.
Okay, so I slipped in very quickly there about, are you planning on selling them or are you going to stick with being a landlord? But you're going to continue being a landlord. So the news about the renters reform and EPCs and all that sort of stuff doesn't concern you, or?
No, not really. I have views about EPCs. That is, I don't think they work. I think I think they don't actually tell you anything about the energy performance of a property because it doesn't measure the right things. One of the things I used to do as a property consultancy was energy performance, and I spent an awful lot of time building and constructing energy efficient homes. In fact, the company I was involved with at the time, we won the first ever energy gold award for energy efficient homes. So this EPC shorthand, which is basically it's a box ticking exercise, doesn't really tell you very much about it at all. I suppose it's better than nothing, but without access to in theory, there is access to grants. In reality, nobody can actually get any grants to improve their homes, whether they're landlords or tenants or homeowners. So that the idea that there is cash out there to help improve the energy efficiency is a bit of a myth. The government has not spent all of its money. Probably never will. So the idea of finding of creating energy efficient homes, I'm afraid that's down to individual homeowners or landlords to do what they can. So when things go wrong, when windows break, we're more than happy to replace them with energy efficient window systems. I mean, all the properties are all flat, so lagging the roof is probably not an option.
Yeah, and I think, I think flats are going to find it harder to get up to the level that the government are wanting them to get up to.
Yes.
Even with a £10,000 limit on spending, I don't think that £10,000 will achieve it. However, I may well come back to you and talk again about EPCs when we do that properly. But you were saying there that all of your properties are flats. Can you tell me about the strategy that made you want to buy, because your properties, apart from being flats, they're quite similar, most of them. So what was your strategy in terms of finding those properties?
Well, I always go back to daughters, and that you have to treat all three of them equally because we have no favourites. Therefore, each flat was purchased was identical or very similar. so that they could. So the first 3 we bought were all effectively studio apartments, so they can have a starter home each. Once we realised that they were going to not have their starter homes that we planned, then we looked on at 2-bedroom apartments. And the reason why flats are cheaper than were cheaper than houses, probably still are, even despite all the leasehold nonsense. It's they are. It was about price. It was about price and affordability. You couldn't buy a house for the price you could buy the flat for at the time we were looking.
Okay, so you've got this X number of flats. Did you at any point think, maybe I won't buy 2 of those, I'll buy a 3-bedroom terraced property in, perhaps a particularly leafy part of Enfield? Because I think, to be fair, all of your properties fall or fell within a licensing area, a selective licensing area now. Is that right? So they're in
Yes.
they're in the 14 wards that are generally classed as the more deprived, I think is the term. Still good areas, but, just in the inverted L in Enfield. Did you ever at any point think, okay, well, I'm going to diversify slightly and buy a nice flat in, I don't know, Southgate that will have a city person living in it or something? Did you ever think about going down that way?
The yields are lower
Okay.
in leafy parts, so you get a better yield in the. I'd hesitate to use the poorest parts, but use the deprived areas. So, yes, I suppose they are. So you get a better yield. So it's more about a return. Plus, of course, there is the altruistic side of it, whereas, I'm bringing on and improving properties for people who can't afford to buy but want to carry on living in those areas.
So does that link back a bit to your housing association type days and making sure that... Okay.
I believe in we should be responsible landlords, and we should do our best for our tenants. I think we do.
I think you do as well. And I think you are one of... You're very welcome. But, I mean, you do a lot of landlords have an automatic thing about no pets, no smoking, no DSS. And you kind of have to coax them into agreeing to certain things. But you've always been fairly comfortable and easy with DSS.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me. Yeah. The pets, however, that's another issue. We have had 1 or 2 instances where people allow their dogs to tear the place up and wreck it and create havoc when they should never have had a dog there in the first place. And nobody should smoke anyway, so I have no problem having a smoking ban in any of the flats because it's bad for your health, so don't smoke.
Okay. But you say about damage that you've had. So you've had a few issues along the years that have cost you money, presumably. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Any that you'd care to elaborate on? Anything that particular springs to mind?
Well, there was one in particular which is began to run into rent arrears. I was never quite managing to pay the full amount. So meaningful discussions were had with yourselves as agents, and you had with the said tenant, and arrangements came to, and all in all, they were kind of being kept. But it turned out that other aspects, not just keeping a pet there, which was a bit of a nuisance, but also keeping a motorcycle in the flat, which was rather annoying, and in a cupboard, which was even more annoying. So there were a number of issues, and it took ages to when they wouldn't pay the rent. It did take ages to get rid of them, to get them out, and to which, all's fair. You have to be fair about these things, but it did create losses, and the state they left the place in was outrageous.
Oh, for a minute there, I was racking my brain and thinking, which one? I'm with you entirely. Yes.
So that was a problem. Although I have to say that over the years, generally speaking, I would say that, touch wood, cross fingers, we haven't had too many issues.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking back to that one because that one had, I guess, because it was quite painful, slipped my mind slightly. But I do, it's like a motorbike. Oh, yes, suddenly. Yes, that wasn't actually in the flat, but it was in a cupboard on the estate, shall we say.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of those ones where, yes, I like to think never cross family and friends with rental of any variety. And I know this person wasn't a friend, but any kind of connection, I always think nowadays, just don't go there. Just don't do it.
I would agree. Yes. Having that one single experience, is enough to convince me.
Yeah, I've heard of far too many instances where, a family friend or even a family member have moved in and it's caused issues. So yeah, that was a learning point. But despite that, so things like rent arrears and stuff, I know that you still don't use rent guarantees, for example. Mm-hmm. Is there a reason for that?
Well, being a bit mean, and apart from the fact that they cost money, then I don't necessarily see the point of them. If it's somebody who's struggling or doesn't have sufficient income or hasn't been working for long enough or doesn't have the necessary background to show that they can pay the rent, then, you will go out and get them to provide a personal guarantor, mm-hmm. which often works. And the last one we talked about was a solicitor was providing a guarantee for their tenant, which as far as I'm concerned, that works fine. You don't need to enter into necessarily an insurance-backed guarantee.
Yeah, I was listening to another podcast the other day, excuse me, and they were saying, why would you take out a rent guarantee on someone who is already a good bet? You really want to have the rent guarantee on someone who's not a good bet. But it just kind of reminds me of, I know, touch wood, we won't have a pandemic again. But I think there were a lot of people during the pandemic who were quite pleased. Well, one of two things, people were either pleased that they had a rent guarantee or they were pleased that they had council tenants. Because either way, they knew they were going to get their rent. It was the people in the middle that were a bit uncertain on things. Okay, so you were saying there about it was you get the yield with the properties that you've got. So were you always conscious of, albeit your exit strategy changed, were you always conscious that was going to be your exit strategy then? It was going to be your pension. You needed to have that regular income rather than having something that would increase in value over time or increase more in value over time.
Well, I know because I have a professional qualification in housing. So I know because I actually wrote an essay on it during my qualifications that house prices have doubled every 10 years since the end of the Second World War. Now, as all financial advisors will tell you, and no, I am not one, that the previous performance is no guarantee of future performance. Yep. And certainly the last 20 years it hasn't stuck to its regulation 10-year cycle, but it hasn't been far off. So we know that house prices go up and house prices go down. So I know that those properties will increase in value. And they all have. So the increase in value is one thing, but it's actually, I was more interested in making sure that the rental stream covered all costs and provided enough of an income to pay an agent to look after it. Oh.
A fabulous professional agent, one might add.
Oh, sorry, did I not mention the fabulous professional agent? Yes. So we need one to. It needs to generate enough income to pay for itself and provide a small surplus wherever possible. However, I have to say that the maintenance costs on most of these properties, and to keep them up to standard, and especially sorting them out after voids, because you have void losses as well, is that the idea of the wealthy landlord, I think, is a little bit of a misnomer. If you take me as an example, because it ain't happening that much.
But you're not one of the more aggressive landlords that I know. So, for example, a lot of landlords recently, not that I'm calling them aggressive, but a lot of landlords recently have been very much on top of my mortgage is going up here. I need to therefore increase the rent by 2, 3, whatever, £100. Now, we've always had increases for you where the tenant has left, but mid-tenancies, you've always been I think you do actually have an interest in your tenants, albeit you're quite hands-off with them. Your properties in some areas are a couple of £100 down on what they could be if you were renting them out again. Is that a deliberate move? Is that part of your whole DSS and housing association type ethos, or?
Yes, and there's one in particular, which I think is a little accidentally in that case. No, I actually quite like the fellow who's who's in the property. I don't want to be mean. But yes, we need to have a discussion. Perhaps this is not the forum to have that conversation, but we do need to sort out something, because when I look at that, I think,
on him, I would agree.
He's a couple of £100 light.
He is. He's a very entertaining character.
Indeed.
And he's been there for a very long time. So he's been there at least 10 years, because he was there before we became involved.
Yeah.
So
he's in that property. He was our first and only tenant.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, we've never had anybody else in that property. So yes, he's been there a long time.
So no void periods at all for a considerable amount of time then.
Yeah.
Just as well your daughter didn't want to move in.
Quite, yes. He probably wouldn't have been able to in that one. Yes. And that was one of the original ones that we thought, because that's one of the 3 studios where we thought, actually, that would work. That would work for one of them.
So at the risk of sounding a bit like a turkey voting for Christmas, possibly not the best expression to use with a vegetarian, but at that risk, now that you're retiring or have a bit more time on your hands and without working full time, do you not think, maybe I'll reduce my costs and I will manage all of this myself?
When you get a terrible hangover, when you have a bad headache, one takes paracetamol or aspirin or something. So why would I want to permanently be on painkillers when you can take an outrageous percentage for looking after them all for me?
Outrageous. Just remember, fabulous and professional. That's all you need to know. Okay. So it's not something that you thought, actually, I want to bring this all in-house and just,
If I could put this out there to anybody watching this or listening to this, if you're thinking about retirement, it is not I'm going to sit around and put my feet up and manage my own properties now because I've got plenty of time. The answer to that is no, I am busier than ever. Thank you.
Okay. Fair enough. Now, along your travels, because you've had these properties for longer than I've known you and for longer than we've been involved in your properties, you've been through a few agents.
Yes. 2 previous year.
Oh, only 2. Okay. All right. I thought it was a couple more than that. Okay. So I don't know. I'm not sure what my question is at this point. I was not necessarily what's gone wrong, but what has led you to moving each time?
The first one was a startup business who I'd known through another connection, and decided to start up. He was actually a builder, maintenance, etc. So he took it on. He decided to set up as effectively as an agent, and I thought we'd give him the chance and let him look after the properties. Unfortunately, he didn't do a terribly good job. So we looked to move elsewhere. Took on another firm, and I have to say they were fine. They were fine. The frequency of information and the frequency of them collecting the rent and paying in seemed to vary. Now, I'm a simple sort of a chap, and I understand and have understood for some considerable time now that there are apparently 12 months in a year, and therefore one would expect sort of 12 payments in a year. That might be quite nice. But some years they were 13 and some they were 11. And it became quite hard to follow, especially once having to do a tax return to explain to Her Majesty's government where all these things come in. So that was why I was looking around for a new agent. And then I came across this very nice woman who was very professional, but also a startup business. And I thought,
I know, I was going to say, didn't you learn? Why would you do that?
Why do you never learn from your errors? But actually, we've been together a while now.
We have.
So far, so good.
It has been 10 years, I think, to the month.
Good grief, has it really? Happy
10
anniversary.
Years. I know. Well, I mean, yes. I mean, we probably should have said this earlier, or I should have said this earlier, that Denny and Sarah were, in fact, my first landlords in starting up Belvoir Enfield. And you've seen some tremendous mistakes from me, particularly in the early days, which we won't go into on air because I will have to edit them out if you do. But yes, fun. And you've stuck with us, and we're still here. So thank you, obviously. But actually, that brings me to a question about how you and Sarah run your business, because and I'm going to call it a business because landlording is a business. So you are very much the day-to-day person that we speak to. Mm-hmm. Whether it's, about maintenance or change of tenants or anything like that. You are very much the day-to-day person. And then we know something is wrong if we hear from Sarah, because it's going to be something about finance or
money.
It's the money side. So when we got our new IT system our new CRM system in February last year, we had a big mistake. That was horrendous. That was really bad. But that upset our finances quite a lot because we just did not understand this system. And so then we were hearing from Sarah. Yes, we got to know Sarah at that point. After 9 years, we got to know Sarah.
It reminded us very much of the previous agent that we had, where getting the finance information was not as simple and easy as it should have been.
No, it was, and it still is very difficult. We're a few months... We're actually 14 months into this, 16 months into the system, and we still hate it. Yeah, we still hate it. We still have issues with it. However, that's a completely different subject that will just make me shake for a while. But yes, so did you deliberately structure it in that way, though, that you were going to be the day-to-day running and Sarah was going to be the finance, or was that? How did that? Yeah. Yes.
Because my background being in property, building, construction, maintenance. Although we both do have a background in housing management, she left housing management long before I ever did. So it was basically, it was down. That side of it was all mine. So what Sarah did was just effectively keep the Excel spreadsheet so that we could give that to our accountant every year.
Okay, and that seems to work quite well for you. It's like is it good cop, bad cop, if you like, almost in that respect. Sarah's the muscle. Okay,
Yes.
so clearly you've been doing this for a long time and it is working for you in terms of it's going to be continuing to provide you with your retirement income, etc. If you were going to do anything differently, if you had your time again and you could do anything differently, is there anything that you would do differently? And what would it be?
Knowing what I know now, I would have set up a company and built them all as a company. I wouldn't have done them as an individual, private individual. But at the time, buying them as a private individual was really the only way of doing it, and wasn't tax inefficient. Whereas now it's not the most efficient way of doing it. So if I was doing it now, I would have bought them within a company structure and use that company structure. It's very complicated to take them out of personal. Well, it's not complicated. It is kind of complicated, but it's very expensive to take them out of personal ownership and put them into a company structure now. So no, we won't be doing that. But that's what I would have done differently. Yeah. I would have done it as a company. Okay.
So you wouldn't have bought anything earlier. You wouldn't have bought any different types of properties.
I would have bought them. I would have bought them earlier. I mean, I realised when I was working for, let's just put it this way, a major national house builder. When I discovered that on every development they did, all the directors bought apartments and properties at cost price as part of the development, and they therefore built up rather large portfolios fairly early on. And if I'd known about it and had the cash, or I'd thought about it and had the cash, yes, I would have started much earlier. So my advice is to anybody out there who wants to get into it is start as early as you possibly can. I didn't get into it until I was, in my 50s. I should have started doing it in my 20s or certainly 30s.
Okay. And, okay. Is there anything, I'm sure there must be, because I'm racking my brain now, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think would be really interesting to people?
You haven't asked me what I think of the managing agents that we use.
Yeah, we're going to skip over that one. Okay.
Who, all in all, yeah, they're kind of okay. A bit cheeky at times, but actually that's all part of the fun. No, in all seriousness, I think you've had you've had an interesting 10 years of business, and it's been fun.
Interesting.
going through it all. No, let's not go into some of the early days. But we all learned together, and I think that's what was quite important. And I was quite interested in. It's good to see you grow in your business.
Thank you very much. It's yes, we've had. There were a couple of instances at the very beginning. I think I mentioned. Yeah, I won't go there this time. But yes, it was very interesting setting up from scratch, and it was. Although being part of a franchise, there were certain things that seemed to happen in Enfield that didn't happen anywhere else in this sort of Lincolnshire type area franchise group, which presented certain issues. So that I think there were a couple of occasions where you actually had considerably more knowledge on certain things than I did, which was very entertaining. But I think over the 10 years, I would hope that we've built up a decent working relationship in this time, and that I get to tease you about your Star Wars habits and things like that.
Well, I'm quite happy to recommend you to other landlords should they wish to.
Done.
And I think that's. I wouldn't do that. You don't recommend people that you don't think are any good. So I think the proof is there that you're doing all right.
Oh, thank you. What is the one bit of advice that you would give to any aspiring landlord, apart from, I know you said earlier, get into it early? What's one other bit of advice that you would give people?
Get it into early, overpay the mortgage, and never, ever sell.
That's a good nutshell. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. Would you like to, while we're here, would you like to give a plug to your newer venture? Because you're not quite retired, are you? So would you like to give a little shout out to your newer venture?
Well, as I previously said, I do have 3 daughters. The middle daughter, I assist her in her business. She is a costume and lingerie designer and maker. So she hand makes stunning and beautiful costumes for cosplay, for stage theatre. She's done a couple of operas, bits and pieces for small operas, and an awful lot of cosplay. And that's what she does. And she makes lingerie, luxury lingerie, which is perhaps one might say on the senior end of the market. And again has a number of burlesque performers on her client books. And I don't know when this will be going out, but people in Enfield would be able to go and see her, because Velvetina Lee is sponsoring the Enfield Pride event at the Dugdale Centre on the 10th of June.
Oh, it will be just after that.
That's a shame.
So we'll put a note out beforehand about it.
Yeah.
We'll put a shout out on our page that you're coming to be interviewed, and this is what you do. It is very interesting underwear that I'm sadly way too old to be wearing. So not
You're
going to go there.
never too old, Rachel. And a young gal like you.
And on that happy note, thank you very much, Denny. It has been fabulous.
You're more than welcome, and we'll speak soon. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this episode, then we'd love your support. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode of the podcast with your friends.
We'd also love to hear from you about any topics you'd particularly like us to discuss. Please send an email to yourlettingsjourney@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening, and see you for the next episode of Your Lettings Journey. Goodbye.
Goodbye.